The loneliness of the artist's studio, when intimacy becomes work. There is a strange silence inside an artist's studio. Not ordinary silence, but the kind created by concentration, observation, and unspoken emotion. A camera waits on a tripod. Light falls across the floor. Someone adjusts a pose while another person studies the scene carefully, searching for something impossible to fully explain. And in that quiet space, intimacy becomes part of the work. Not romance, not performance, but emotional closeness shaped by creativity itself. Photography, especially portrait and nude photography, often creates temporary relationships that feel unusually intense. Two strangers may spend hours together in vulnerable conditions, sharing silence, trust, direction, and emotional attention. The photographer studies details most people never notice. Expressions, hesitation, breathing patterns, tiny shifts in comfort or confidence. The subject, meanwhile, stands in a position of visibility. Observed closely, interpreted visually, sometimes emotionally exposed. This exchange can create a powerful sense of connection. But connection inside the studio is complicated. Because unlike ordinary intimacy, it exists within a professional structure. The camera is always there. For many artists, the studio becomes emotionally isolating precisely because they spend so much time creating emotional proximity without fully participating in it. A photographer may spend years capturing vulnerability while hiding their own. They learn how to direct emotion, observe emotion, even aestheticize emotion, without necessarily resolving their personal loneliness outside the frame. In some ways, the artist becomes both participant and outsider at the same time. Close enough to witness intimacy, distant enough to remain behind the lens. This tension has existed throughout art history. Many photographers and painters became deeply fascinated with human presence, not only beauty, but fragility, uncertainty, longing, and solitude itself. Some artists chased perfect composition. Others chased emotional truth. And often, the studio became the only place where they felt genuine human connection, even if temporary. But temporary connection can leave an emotional echo. Especially when creative collaboration ends in ordinary life resumes. There is also the psychological pressure of constantly observing people through artistic perception. Over time, some artists begin seeing human interaction through visual layers, light, gesture, framing, symbolism, rather than simply experiencing moments naturally. The habit of observation becomes permanent. And while this deep sensitivity can create extraordinary work, it can also create emotional distance. Because constantly analyzing human emotion is not the same as fully living inside it. In modern creative culture, this loneliness can become even stronger. Today's photographers are expected to produce not only images but identities. Personal brands, online presence, continuous visibility. The studio, once private, now often feeds directly into public platforms. Behind-the-scenes footage, curated authenticity, carefully crafted vulnerability. And yet, despite constant connection online, many artists describe feeling increasingly isolated. Surrounded by attention, but disconnected from intimacy that exists without performance. Still, there is something deeply human about the artist's studio. It remains one of the few spaces where silence still matters. Where people pause long enough to truly look at one another. Where vulnerability, trust, and attention briefly become more important than speed. Even if imperfectly, even if temporarily. And perhaps that is why artists continue returning to these quiet spaces despite the emotional complexity they carry. Because sometimes the studio is not only a workplace. It is also a search. For presence. For understanding. For moments of connection that feel real enough to survive the frame. In the end, the loneliness of the artist's studio is not simply about being alone. It is about standing at the edge of human intimacy, close enough to capture it, but never fully able to keep it. And maybe that is the hidden paradox of photography itself. The camera preserves moments, but it cannot preserve the feeling of living inside them.